We living in the scriptures of Revelation. They gotta separate church and state.
Welcome to Church and State, where we boldly take on the collision of two topics that often brings about energetic and polarizing discussions: politics and religion. You can't talk about it at the dinner table. It can get heated at the barbershop. But we're going to talk about it right here.
I am New York State Assemblywoman Latrice Walker.
And I am Reverend Dr. Robert Waterman.
And together we are Church and State.
Thank you so much for joining us. And I heard that you are already selected your mayor. Who are you going with?
Governor Andrew Cuomo. Well, a number of different reasons. First, of course, it is, I think about when I first got to Albany. I represent a community that, was economically disadvantaged. Sometimes many of the folk felt like politics forgot about them. And one of the biggest issues that we were having was about healthcare. And if you can remember, even prior to getting elected, I was working for another elected official, Congresswoman Yvette Clarke, and we were seeing Interfaith Hospital closing. Long Island College Hospital had just closed. Brookdale Hospital was on the verge of closure. We were losing a lot of the essential services. And there was a federal Medicaid waiver that needed to be applied for. Governor Cuomo was governor at the time and made the application, but also during his process of doing this application, made certain promises to Brooklyn hospitals. Once I got elected, I went up to Albany, and one of my first meetings was, look, this is what you said you were going to do for Brooklyn hospitals. Here we are in this moment now. I need to meet with your hospital crew, a crew of advisors, in order to talk about the needs and where we see this going. It eventually became, first it started out as a $700 million healthcare transformation grant that he included in his budget. And then ultimately it became a $1.5 billion initiative called Vital Brooklyn. Out of that, we were able to do programs such as food RX programs where doctors would give prescriptions. Instead of just giving a prescription, they would say, well, for healthy eyes, eat more carrots, and, being more colloquial now. But they also gave you a food regimen as it relates to what you needed to do to address your ailments. And then the governor's office provided what was called AgriBucks, and you were able to utilize that money in order to take care of that. We were almost at the point where we were at a brownout opportunity. They had to shut the power down into East Brooklyn. We lost opportunities to work the chillers at our hospitals. Elevators were breaking down in NYCHA developments, and people kept saying the elevators were broken. No, we didn't have the power to run the elevator. And people were just not getting the level of electricity that they deserved. They would put their cell phone charger in the wall, and why it takes longer to charge my cell phone on Rockaway Avenue than it takes me to do the same thing in the Upper East Side. And there was a $250 million investment in the Brownsville substation in order to help us get quality, quality electricity delivery within our communities. And so he's a proven leader, every day at 11 a.m. during COVID. Everyone from, here to Timbuktu was glued to the TV to sort of understand this 100-year epidemic that we found ourselves involved in. I think that, it was a leader there, even when people were saying, drink bleach. He helped us through the pandemic. Did he do everything, perfectly? No, it was a 100-year experience, and I don't think there's no perfect person but one. And so all of those things, I want a real leader. I want a leader who's going to be able to go down to Washington, D.C. and do what is right, make sure that those Title I funds that our babies so desperately deserve come to our communities, even in the face of shutting down the U.S. Department of Education. I want to see, DEI programs notwithstanding what's happening in Washington, D.C., continue to be able to flourish. And so these are the things that I've always seen Governor Andrew Cuomo champion. And I know that the best indicator of future performance is past performance. And so I want a real leader. I want someone who can deliver results because they've delivered them before. Standing up on criminal justice reform. And the biggest part of it all, too, is that a lot of times I keep hearing people talk about all of these different things, whether it's climate and this and that. And I'm like, but the things that you're fighting for, these are things that, Governor Cuomo put in his, and many times in his budget. And if it wasn't in his budget, these are some of the bills that he actually signed into law. And so, I think that, it's a great opportunity to have, him as the mayor of the city of New York.
So do you, since we're a church and state, do you think that the moral side of someone's life affects their judgment on the political side?
I think that morality definitely plays a huge part in anyone's delivery of their own personal story, and even in the workplace. Mm-hmm. But one of the things that we always talk about in the assembly is that you cannot legislate morality. Mm-hmm. And so, going, back to our original conversation as it relates to spirituality, whether there's a difference in terms of policy and campaigning and candidates, I think while there may be some intersectionality, there's definitely a role and a place of individualism that each of those things carry with them.
How much effect do you think it carries, even in the plight of our mayor and some of the innuendos of other candidates that's out there that says to the people that we still are going to vote for you, or I can't vote for you because of that issue or issues in your personal life?
So here it is. And so when I make my decisions, I make decisions based on my own sort of personal principles. And one of the things that I think about each and every day is sort of the characteristics of the community that I represent. Many of those, I say all the time that our communities are over-policed. Mm-hmm. And when you are over-policed, it's going to be, a gotcha moment with respect to a lot of the people who live in certain communities. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And, say a person is arrested. Maybe it's a young person, maybe not. Say it's a robbery for whatever the circumstances are, whether it's poverty-based or not. There's always an opportunity for for redemption. Everybody still has in them the spirit of being redeemed. Mm-hmm. And I think that as a believer, that if God is a forgiving God, then why do I feel like I need to damn a person who has come back and say, look, I've made mistakes in life and I'm sorry. And I've learned my lesson, and here is my changed behavior based on whatever those things are. We allow our children to do it. I know we had this conversation before, but we allow the men and the women in our lives to do it on a regular basis sometimes. And so why should an elected official be any different than human? A person who's not always going to make the best decision in life, but can learn from some of the bad choices that we've made. Like who's above that? How does it say the person without
sin? Cast the first
exactly. Stone. Thank you. Yeah. I didn't want to have to go there since I'm here on this side of the table.
He who without sin cast the first stone.
Exactly.
But should when I hear the saying all the time, it's the saying that I'm electing them as my politician, not my pastor. But shouldn't there still be a sense of morals and values even at a elected official position?
Yes.
Aren't electeds held at a higher
100%.
position than the people themselves? So the people can, is that like a pastor? A pastor cannot do what the people do, forsake, as they say. But I think there's a coalition which are indicating that when the leaders themselves fall,
Right.
he without sin cast the first stone. All have sinned and come short of the glory of God. But the consciousness of people is that it doesn't matter. You are supposed to be here. I can do it, but you can't.
See, that's another part of this sort of superhuman expectation of elected officials, let's say, or pastors, quite frankly. And, we don't walk around with a superhuman, existence or a magic wand. When there's something that we want to have accomplished, and whether it's a bill that we want to see passed, and we're not able to pass that particular bill, or we're not able to get this particular thing funded in the budget, it bothers us. Like, it hurts. People say to me all the time, "How you doing?" "I'm tired." Never once do they say, "You know what, why don't you go over and take a break?" No, it's at 3:00, I'm having this particular thing, and I want you to be here at this thing. And it's like, let me be tired and let me lay down, right? And so we also have to recognize that even though folk are elected officials, they're human beings living human experiences. You 100% are held to a different standard. And you 100% should be, because you need to be in a position where you can lead by example. There's something even in the law that says that we have to make sure that we don't even have the appearance of impropriety. That's the standard for lawyers. But lawyers fall short of that each and every day. Human beings fall short of that each and every day. And it's really about, how do you rebound whenever it is that you find yourself in this situation, in this position. And so for me, I believe that everyone you should definitely be judged by all of the things, who you are, your character. But I also believe, with respect to anything that's in the legal realm, that due process, to me, is as important to American jurisprudence as air, food, and water is to life. And if we don't allow for due process, if we don't allow for people who are accused to be able to have their day to confront their accuser, and we decide to condemn people in the court of public opinion, even though, the court of jurisprudence has not acted, or if they did act, it's not conclusive. There's appeals and this and that. It has not taken its full course. Then, I believe in allowing that area to play itself out. I'm a lawyer first. And so there has to be some level of respect for the American legal process. And so I think that's another piece to it too. So one is not legislating immorality. Are people allowed an opportunity for redemption? Due process is a very important thing. And then, there's also, based on, relationships that you have. And when you see people who have been tried and tested and true, you have a relationship with them, I think that, loyalty, integrity, respectability are all things that will come into play. But when it comes to politics, your word is important. And so once I give someone my word, my dad will always teach me that my word is my bond. And then, now after I've given my word, that the dynamics change, it doesn't mean that my word changed, because it has to mean something.
So what is that? The scripture says, "To much is given, much is required." Do you think that refers to also the leadership of a politician?
Yes, it refers to everyone, right? It doesn't single out politicians.
No, I'm just saying because of the leadership capacity, because that speaks to those that are in leadership. Too much is given, much is required. That means the more that is given to you, that means you are held now at a higher level morally than those who sit in the pews or those who or who walk in the streets. As a leader, as a pastor, as a educator, as a captain or a chief, or as a commissioner, as a mayor, as the governor, as an assembly person, as a deacon, as a deaconess, as a trustee. That leadership, principals, a superintendent. I could go on and on and on when it talks about leadership. That's held at to much is given, much is required. So that's is that the belief that you believe that is to everyone who's in any particular leadership?
I believe so, yes. But I also believe that that's just a part of the human experience, right? Like, I sit now in a position of representing the 55th Assembly District, but I live across the street from where I went to first grade, right? So each and every day, I get to see how God has blessed me in this space, right? And so my neighbors can tell you stories about me when I was a little girl. They can tell you stories about my father, who's been deceased since I was 13 years old. And so I think that when it comes to that particular experience, the humility, I think, of it all, when you're grounded and you're back and you're in your own space and you have to deal with you as the individual, I think that's when you begin to sort of develop your do's and your don'ts. Not because, of course, I don't want to bring ill repute on my family, on myself, on my district, but I also think about all of these other people who had enough faith in me to take the leap of faith with me on election day and repeatedly on election day, whenever it is that I'm on the ballot, to be able to say, this is the sister who I want to represent me in office. And so it's a great value. It's a great opportunity. It's definitely one that I have the highest level of respect for. And I live my day recognizing that much is definitely required of me, and I give as much of it as I can, right? When you give, you should always pay it. When you receive, you should always pay it forward. And so, that's another way that I think about what I'm given. What's required of me is to be able to pay it forward.
And I think that's a good point to kind of bring this to a close. Is that again, we talked about the respect of black churches, the drive-bys that are run through, those who stay in worship. That's why it's important for the moral and value of elected official as well, because they're like everybody else, yet they were given an opportunity to serve others at a greater level, because the greatest among us are servants. So I put elected officials in that servant capacity, that they're serving others, and that's why their relationship with God needs to be intact. That's why I believe that every elected should have a place of worship.
In the scriptures of Revelation, they gotta separate church and state.
Thank you all for joining us here at Church and State, because together we are Church and State.
Thank you again, everyone, for listening. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. And in the words of Nelson Mandela, it always seems impossible until it's done. Thank you so much.
Maybe I'm just rambling, but isn't it crazy that every time we lose and they win, they get richer?